Guyana will become the next Dubai, and we, the citizens of Guyana, are super excited to benefit from our homeland the same way the citizens of Dubai benefit from theirs.
This is what life is like for citizens from the Emirate of Dubai. When you are born, your parents pay nothing. Your delivery and checkups for the next 9 months are all free. Then you grow up and you go to school. Local school in Dubai is free! And so are universities, because Dubai will pay for you to get a degree.
I studied at Zayed University and New York University, both for free.
Who's gonna pay for that?
The government.
Then you get married. If you can't afford the wedding, you get $20,000 to throw a wedding. And after marriage, every local Dubai family gets this: free land. Did you get free land?
Yes.
Did you get free land?
Yes.
Did you get free land?
Sure, yes.
And if you cannot afford the home, then you get a grant to build it for free.
I also can't afford building a house. I can get a 0 interest loan on housing.
Zero?
0.
If you need to go to the hospitals are free. And if you need surgery that's not available here, they will fly you to another country to get treatment for free. When you become a senior citizen, you get discounts, many discounts. And if you live alone and can't afford it, Dubai will even send a caretaker to look after you for free. And when you die, well, in Dubai, that's also free. Your funeral will be taken care of, and Dubai will build a full tent with air conditioning within 5 hours of your death next to your home, so your friends can come and say goodbye to you.
Guyana will become the next Dubai.
With wonderful people all over this country. She is a beauty, beautiful Guyana.
A very good evening and welcome to Globespan 24/7 as we bring you our Monday night program. A very sober day today as we reflect on the sad events of this morning. It is really a sad day for Guyana, but we have to call it what it is and then see what caused this to happen. We want to thank Noah Singh for making this platform available, and of course to Devin Bisu, our technical specialist. Tonight, we want to talk about the high cost of living, the economy, oil revenue, and future economic direction of Guyana. But before we introduce our guests, we want to, again, on behalf of Globespan 24/7 and all Guyanese, we want to offer our deepest condolences to the family, to the teachers, to all the supporters there, and everyone that is affected by this tragedy we had last night. And we pray that it will take time to bring healing to the family, but we pray that the authorities will find out exactly what transpired, what caused this disaster, and hopefully in the future, in making dorms again, we can take corrective action to ensure that our students or anyone else who lives in dorms do not have to undergo this kind of tragedy. Tonight we have PNC Member of Parliament, Mr. Dinesh Jaiprashad. He's also the Shadow Social Service Minister. And of course, Mr. Elton Lowe, an advisor to the Leader of the Opposition. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Good to be on. Good to be on.
Oh, okay. And of course, my co-host, Dr. Rose. Dr. Rose, welcome.
Thank you, Charles, and welcome everyone. Welcome, Mr. Lowe, and welcome, Mr. Jai Prasad.
Before we
Thank you, sir.
start, we have a little clipping to show what transpired today. So we want, Devin, you want to show that clipping? And then here in New York, we are having a fundraising, and Mr. Vishnu Mahadev, who has been a pillar of the in New York here, he has been a lot of human service to the people of Guyana. He will come on to also tell us what they are doing. So Devin, over to you.
The management and staff of Globespan International extend condolences to the families and friends of the victims who lost their lives in the horrific fire that erupted on Sunday night at the dormitory at the Madia Secondary School in Region 8, Guyana. It was reported that the fire has not only claimed the lives of 18 females and one 5-year-old male, but also left several others critically injured and hospitalized. We pray that they all have a safe recovery. May the souls of those who lost their lives find peace.
Thank you, Devin. And we have now Mr. Mahadev. Mr. Mahadev?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon.
Yeah, go on.
Okay, the reason why I would like to participate in this program for many reasons, but more importantly, yesterday we had a national disaster in Guyana where 20 little children lost their lives meaninglessly. And we in the diaspora need to pay careful attention in terms of what we can do to help those families that is now struck with grief and with major expenses. We are now trying through the diaspora to raise funds and to raise the awareness of the tragedy that took place there in Guyana. And we're hoping that with the help of NOHAR and the Globespan, you guys will be able to get us some more people to participate so we can actually be able to be of greater help to the family in Guyana that has experienced this disaster. I'm open to questions in the meanwhile.
No, what can the people do, Fish, to help in the process?
Well, we are actually using the opportunity now to raise some funds so that can be used to get the kids.
What I'm saying, where can if someone want to contribute, where should they go to contribute to the fund?
Okay, I will actually be releasing that information tomorrow because we are working with the banks here in New York. We already have a relationship with the NBS Bank in Guyana that made a commitment to help us to conduit the funds. We are working with the Amerindian community, the public secretary for the permanent secretary for the Amerindian Affairs. We are working with the Office of the President. We are working with the Guyana ambassador in Washington, Sam Hines, and we are also working with the regional doctor for Madia. She's given us very strong support for this effort.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Mahadev. So when you get that, can you post on social media so people can know where to go to? And of course,
I will definitely do that tomorrow.
And give it a Globespan so on the Wednesday program they can stream it to know where people can contribute.
Well, thank you again, sirs, and thank you guys very much for doing this sterling job you keep on doing, and I'm always there with you guys. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Mahadev.
Thank you, sir.
Director.
All right. MP, Mr. Jai Prasad, do you want to make a comment on the tragedy?
Thank you very much, sir. Good evening, colleagues, viewers in Guyana, around the world, diaspora. Indeed, it's a sad moment for us in Guyana. I want to say that very, very sympathetic at the moment to the families, relatives, friends, teachers, supporters, and most importantly, the people of Region 8 and Guyana. Indeed, it's a loss for us. These are our futures, our leaders. Who knows what they could have, amount to. We, the PNC, APNU, AFC, wishes to support all those who are in need of any assistance, and we have you in prayers. We are willing to offer psychosocial counseling and therapeutic intervention so that parents of the victims and relatives can be able to muster the strength to do whatever possible so that they can carry on. Indeed, it's a sad moment for us, and we put our faith and trust in God so that we can have comfort during these very, very tragic and sad moment. Thank you.
Mr. Lowe?
Yes, absolutely. I also would like to say that our thoughts and prayers go out to the family and friends of those who lost their lives, but also those who are severely injured. We know that several people are still in the hospital. I think some are fighting for their lives and certainly nursing very severe injuries. It is really indeed a national tragedy. One in the likes of which we haven't seen really for some time, and certainly not one as heartbreaking as this. And once the dust settles, so to speak, it is, I think, an opportunity for us to reflect as a nation on fire safety and on various other areas, so that we can see that this never happens again and the nation never has to lose out on so many bright souls in the future. So hopefully we'll be able to get a good understanding of everything that took place. But for now, what we want to say, or at least what I think the sentiment that many people want to express, is that we would love to support as much as possible the families and friends and so on of those who had this terrible loss. And we stand with them in this difficult time.
Dr. Rose?
Yes, and I must say it's a very, very sad day. At 4 a.m. this morning, we learned of the tragic death of 19 children, 18 girls and 1 boy, who perished in a fire at their dorm at Madja Secondary School. As we mourn the loss of these precious, beautiful children, our hearts and prayers, we must extend our condolences and heartfelt, sincerity to their parents, families, and loved ones. This is a very, very sad day for the country and all Guyanese. And while there is going to be an investigation, we must, and I say we must always keep them in our prayers. At this time, we, the members and staff of Globespan Television, wish to extend our sympathy to all the parents, their relatives, and loved ones. And may the souls of these little babies rest in peace. It is true, and it is great to know that President Ali has declared 3 days of mourning in recognition of these precious little babies. May God bless them and bless all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. And I'm so glad Dr. Rose mentioned you guys have been done very well. We want to, I think, President Ali this morning, I was told he was at Oakley Airport very early this morning to fly into Madhya to be with the families. And I think that's what a leader does. And we want to give our appreciation to the president. And as Dr. Rose mentioned, 3 days of mourning. So please observe that if you can. Based on my spiritual belief, I am confident that all these 19 souls, the 18 girls and the young kid, their soul will be in a very beautiful place, that they will be at peace and they'll have unconditional love. And we pray that the families will be heartened to know that despite this loss physically, that the souls of these babies, as Dr. Rose called them, are all in heaven. So we want to thank you all. Tonight, as I mentioned, we're talking about the high cost of living, the economy, oil revenues, and the future of Direction Guyana. But gentlemen, before we start, and if you don't mind, we're running out, time is running out so fast. Can you quickly, Mr. Jai Prasad, Member of Parliament, tell us exactly who you are, which part of Guyana you're from, and what are you in the PNC?
Thank you very much. Good evening again. Well, my name is Dinesh Jai Prasad, and have been a member of the PNC for mostly all of my life. That's the party that I know. My family came through it, and I'm in. I have served as Central Executive Member for the PNC in 2015, and have been part and parcel of the PNC and the PNC activity since I became a youth. I'm currently serving as Member of Parliament, shadowing Human Services and Social Security. I'm also a senior public servant, serving the Department of Education as the Senior School Welfare Officer in Region Number 6. So I'm very much involved in the education of children, ensuring that they are in school, and work hard to ensure that dropout and absenteeism is reduced in Region 6. That's part of my public service work. As a politician, it is very, very appropriate, I should say, to be living in Port Farhan. To be specific, Abuja, being a PNC. We know that the area is predominantly PVP area, but like my predecessors, Port Farhan is fortunate to have 4 MPs. Dr. Cherry Jagan, his brother Derek, Mr. Harold Singh, and myself. So indeed, I am very much blessed to be in Port Farhan, one of the few villages that produce 4 MP, 2 belonging to the PVP and 2 from the PNC. My work in the village since 2020 has been visible. From the time I became MP to now, we have the area in terms of informing the government to ensure that infrastructure work and facilities are set up so that the people of my area, people of the region, can benefit, so that we can be able to enjoy the comfort of being citizens of this. So that's about me. Easygoing, very simple, cool. I don't have any beef with anybody. I just do my job.
Thank you. Mr. Lowe?
Hi, so just to give your viewers a bit of my background, I know to many Guyanese it will be of interest that that I'm a former QC head prefect there. But after that, I studied political science and economics at Amherst College. I worked at Goldman Sachs & Co. for a couple of years. I moved back and I worked in Guyana as an investigator and anti-corruption policy analyst at the State Assets Recovery Agency. I then became economic advisor to the previous leader of the opposition. This is the second leader of the opposition that I'm serving as economic advisor for. And I am the oil and gas spokesperson as well for the opposition. And so, of course, many Guyanese will be familiar with me from the press and from press conferences. This is separate from that. I had formed a nonprofit a while ago that used to work in education, especially with helping those in secondary school from underserved schools to benefit from algebra and mathematics tutoring. So that's generally my so to speak my resume. But I'm what I try to do is to bring the insights that come from my study abroad, my work abroad, as well as my research here in Guyana, to the office of the Leader of the Opposition across, first of all, economic issues, but second of all, oil and gas issues.
Thank you. Great. So quickly, I know, as I said, time is really pressing on us. I want to ask you quickly, Mr. Low and Mr. Jayaprasad. All independent thinkers believe, whether it's locally or overseas, that the oil contract we signed was the worst contract ever signed in the history of our country. And it appears to be the worst oil contract in the world. Now, I listened to the Leader of the Opposition. He said he will talk about the contract after the local government election. So my question to you two gentlemen, and maybe Mr. Low, you can start. You are the economic advisor to the Leader of the Opposition. Will APNU renegotiate this contract or change element of the contract for the benefit of the people of Guyana?
Thank you very much for your question. The first thing that I would say is I would never make such a sweeping statement as all independent thinkers think. That's a very sweeping statement. But also, you know, there are contracts even offshore Guyana that are considered in a less in less of a pleasing light even than the Stabroek Block contract. Now we understand that there are many concerns regarding this contract. We understand that civil society has expressed those concerns. The media has been speaking on those, and we've resolved that we're going to address those concerns. And there are a wide range of concerns, things like ring fencing and insurance issues. There's a wide range of concerns that we will address. But what the Leader of the Opposition has said is what I would echo, which is that we want to ensure that Guyanese get as much as possible out of this contract. We want to ensure that Guyanese are able to benefit as much as possible. And so we will continue to, we will work with the operator to ensure that we can produce the best that we can for the country.
Mr. Low, and I know Mr. Jayaprasad, I want to come in here. You're too broad. You're telling us, you know, you're building castles in the air. Tell us specifically what we will change, if anything, in the contract if the PNC were to get back into office.
Well, I don't want to delve into too much specifics because there are a lot of issues that, you know, will require conversations with the company for us to move things forward. But what I can say definitively is that there will be a lot of work around ring fencing. The Leader of the Opposition recently spoke about ring fencing. I can say that when it comes to insurance issues, those will be dealt with much more seriously than they're currently being dealt with, and that there will be quite a lot that is done to ensure that Guyana is fully covered, even if that just means enforcing existing provisions, because what we have observed is that the existing provisions are not being enforced by the government, and that has left the country quite vulnerable. We've also observed that when it comes to the audit of the expenses of the offshore oil expenses, that legitimate rights of Guyana are often ignored. One of the things we want to point out to people is that even if there are different terms for an oil contract, even if the fiscal terms are different, if we don't take seriously the auditing of the oil contract, then you won't actually have impacted the financials. You'll just have the appearance of a better contract without an actual fact of a better contract. So that's why we've got a lot of focus on those types of issues, and that's why we continue to address them.
Okay, I know, Mr. Low, you're a bright boy, you're a QC boy, you're head prefect, you work at Goldman Sachs. Were you privy, and Mr. Jayaprasad, I'm not leaving you out, but quickly with Mr. Low, were you privy to the contract before it was signed?
So I was not engaged in that element of government at that time. I would have been an investigator at the State Asset Recovery Agency at that time. And so what I really was able to do is look at other contracts and look at...
So the answer is no. The answer is no.
I wouldn't have been involved in that element of governance at that time.
Okay. Mr. Jayaprasad, Mr. Low is give us two specific areas. One is ring fencing. And before you come on, Mr. Jayaprasad, I just want to mention this. I read in the newspaper last week, Dr. Tara Singh, a very bright guy here in New York, he wrote a letter in the newspaper, which I think was very misinformed. And what Mr. Low just mentioned here, he seemed to forget that there is no ring fencing. So what these guys are telling us is that, oh, when Lisa 1, Lisa 2, the capex is paid off, the capital expenditure, Guyana will get you balloon profit, which is ridiculous. They know it's not true, but we still write about it. So I'm glad Mr. Rowe mentioned ring fencing as part of the renegotiated contract. What are some of the areas, Mr. Jaiprasad, do you think the contract should look at, if any?
Thank you very much. I will not be able to say much about it because that is not my area of specialty. But I want to say that as it relates to ring fencing, we have to protect our people. Guyana basically is on the coastline, most of our population. And if we can't renegotiate this contract and ensure that the maximum, then we will be, shooting ourselves in the foot. So PNC, APNU, AFC, it is hope that once we get into office, renegotiating, and we will have to ensure that in the existing contract, there are areas that points towards amendment and negotiation or renegotiation. We have to ensure that we enforce that so that the population can benefit from this this mass of wealth. At the moment, we are not seeing that filtering down to the people, but as we go on in our discussion, we will get more to that.
Yeah, but it's two things, Mr. Prashad. One, the PNC gave us this contract, and two, the PEP in the opposition said they will renegotiate. They're not doing anything, and now you're telling us that when you get back in office, you're going to do it. So I don't know what to do with our politicians. No pun intended.
One thing I would point out, though, that is important to note, is that the coalition already went back to the operator. You may recall that the royalty was increased from 1% to 2%, but what happened is that the royalty was recoverable. The coalition went back to the operator and was able to get them to commit to not recovering the royalty. So that was an adjustment that was made to the contract, which of course has yielded already, I believe, hundreds of millions of dollars US. So
Mr. Lowe, sorry to cut you off, and I don't like to be disrespectful, but that was a contract that the APNU AFC signed, which was ridiculous, and you had to go back now to change even the 2% that they claim they got, so it is
a legacy contract that existed before.
Come on.
It is a contract that was there all along.
Okay, Dr. Rose, over to
you. Gentlemen, good evening.
Good evening.
Again. Now, Mr. Danishwar, let me just change the topic for the time being. You're from Port Morant.
Correct.
The heart of PPP stronghold, and the birthplace of the late Katie Jagan. What prevented you from joining the PEP, and what encouraged you to be a member of the AP and UAFC?
Well, what I would say is that I was born one house away from Cherry Jagan home. That's bringing it closer now. And even though it is a PPP stronghold, we have a demarcation. I would say that we have a choice to choose as to which party we want to support. My father and my uncles were members of the PNC back in the 70s and the 80s. And I came out of that and saw some good proposals, good ideas, good development under the PNC, and I continue that same trend. It is my choice. It is not that, I was indoctrinated into it and you have to follow because your parents are. No. I, as an individual, have a right to choose, and my choice is the PNC. In looking at education, infrastructure, health, these are the things that caused me to cling more to the PNC. And now we have AP and UAFC coalition, and that's basically it. But as I said earlier, the village is predominantly PPP support base. We live with mutual respect. I am a PNC. I interact and live among my neighbors who are PPP. That's the big issue. And when it comes to voting, then there are individuals who normally vote PNC, majority vote PPP, but there are some individuals who have a choice, who vote based on the merit of their conscience or policy and proposal from the PNC, PNU, and that's about it.
Were you a member of parliament during the Granger administration?
No, sir. No.
Okay. Now, how are you being viewed by your neighbors, relatives, and friends? Do they resent you being a member of the PNC, or they just act normal?
They act normal. We don't have any rift in the community in terms of PPP and PNC. We have, it's your choice. Basically, when it comes to election time, my neighbor put up their red flag. I put up my green flag. And sometimes we come out and we help each other put up the red flag and the green flag. No beef, no story. We quarrel a little bit. Your party is better than my party, and my party is better than your party. And that's it. At the end of the day, we are members of the same community. I am a public servant. So the community look up to me in terms of guidance in so many areas. They come to me, I help them with so many areas. We are not seeing PPP and PNC and that. We are seeing ourselves as members of a community that need to depend on each other. Something should happen at my home. My neighbor is the first person I will call on, and he's a PPP member. Similarly, I lend assistance to my neighbors. Apart from the political thing, we are human beings and we are civil so far.
Okay.
And that is what I appreciate, in my community.
So you'll shake Dr. Ramaya's hands.
He's my friend. He knows that.
Okay, good. Mr. Lowe. Go ahead.
I shook President Ivanali hand. So that's no.
But your leader has not done that. Your leader has not done that.
Pardon me?
Your leaders refused to shake President Ali's hands. You
Well,
realize
that's his choice.
Okay. Mr. Lowe, you have studied economics and you have become the advisor to the leader of the opposition, Mr. Aubrey Norton. Can you tell our listeners one piece of economic advice you have given him that he has implemented so far?
Sure. You may recall that in the leader's budget speech, there were many economic proposals put forward. I had a hand in a wide range of them, ranging from grants to farmers for them to buy equipment so that they could expand their production, to looking at Guyana's tax policy as it concerns agro-processing and other sorts of manufacturing, to looking at the hiring of graduates from the University of Guyana to conduct analysis, consulting sort of analysis, which is something that's done abroad. It's not really done in Guyana at all. To student stipends, which is we've recently helped to clarify is our 50 for 50 program, 50,000 stipends for 50,000 students. Those are just a few examples, but I probably may name, many others.
What is the PNCR, based on your advice to them, Mr. Norton, policy on agriculture and policy on Gaisuku?
Yes, absolutely. Well, the first thing is that we believe that there is really a fundamental misconception when it comes to agriculture in Guyana that is sadly quite prevalent. And that misconception is that more and better are the same thing. What we need to be doing and where we need to have a lot of focus is on productivity, is on yield, is on cost of production. Is really what we need to ensure is that we have an industry which is productive enough that it can offer high enough wages that we don't see migration of labor from the agricultural sector to other sectors, which is unfortunately something that you often see in oil economies. And in fact, you see countries like Norway and so on with high subsidies on agriculture. That is what we're trying to avoid, having a non-productive agriculture. We often remark, I don't know if you've heard this before, that the Netherlands, despite literally in the name it's saying that they don't have land, is one of the largest exporters of agriculture products in the world, and that's because they focus on things like they emphasize the use of technology to improve their yield and to improve especially their use of land and so on. So our perspective on agriculture is 100% around not just increasing the amount that we produce, but increasing the productivity so that we can increase wages in the agricultural sector. We've already seen rice farmers complain that labor is leaving. We've also seen Gaisuko complain that labor is leaving and going to the oil and gas sector. That is a trend that will continue to happen unless we directly address this, because of wage competition in other areas, and the wage competition will become much more severe as years go on. What that says for Gaisuko is that we will need to look closely at the corporation, and that we will have to look at ways to make the corporation much more productive. That is an evaluation that we will conduct. We have a sense of some of the direction that we need to go there, but that's something that we will, I think, give the Guyanese public some more information on as time goes on, because it is a major issue. And it is not that we see, I think there is a misconception that we're saying that you should close down Gaisuko and get rid of Gaisuko. That is not at all what we're saying. What we're saying is we need to make Gaisuko a productive entity, raise the productivity of the entity, and in that way we'll see progress. And sadly, what has happened is that in the past year or two, we've seen not only the production numbers targets cut for Gaisuko, but the actual production at Gaisuko fall way below the targets, sometimes missing as much as 50%, and all sorts of crazy numbers. We believe that that's how the industry must be approached, and that ultimately we must recognize that because the country has accumulated vast wealth very quickly, and because we anticipate that wages in certain sectors will rise, we can't continue to look at agriculture in the same way.
Mr. Lowe, very nice words. But here my question to you. What specific ways you will do to improve production at Gaisuko? Give me something specific.
Well, one of the things that has long been discussed is mechanization at Gaisuko and retraining workers so that they have are appropriately equipped to deal with that form of mechanization and to the expansion that such mechanization could facilitate. Those are important elements. We do also believe that there are other areas that Gaisuko can be quite productive, but those are areas that we don't really want to speak out quite yet. But there are opportunities for Gaisuko that are not often talked about, because we look at Gaisuko just as a sugar company, and that is one of the things that we think is a missed opportunity. That's one element of it, but those are plans that we'll roll out as time goes on. We don't always want to roll out all of our plans at this stage, but what I will say is we're not looking at Gaisuko just as a sugar company. I myself have said that I would prefer that Gaisuko be renamed National Oil and Gas Training Center or the National Energy Company or something to that effect, because I believe that it must have a much wider mandate.
You're saying you want Gaisuko to be renamed what? Oil and Gas Training Sector?
I have said the national, you can vary the name, but I think that Gaisuko should have a much expanded scope, and should incorporate into really its vision, how it can have an element of impact on the energy landscape in Guyana, You may recall that there is a training facility that is currently being built for oil and gas workers, and at a Gaisuko facility, it's supposed to train Gaisuko workers. That is an initial example of Gaisuko expanding a bit and stepping outside of sugar. What we're saying is there are a lot of opportunities outside of sugar. That when I say that the Guyana National Energy Company or something to that effect, that's what I'm saying. That's not what the party is saying. But what I am saying is that the party is looking at an expanded role for Gaisuko.
Okay. Let me ask you this question. Have you ever advised Mr. Norton to produce an economic policy and an economic plan for the country? If yes, what economic plan have you advised him to produce?
Well, some of your viewers, I would hope, are aware of the leaders' people-centered plan for development and the raft of policies that fall under that.
Explain what people-centered plan means for development.
Yes, absolutely. So what we believe is that development in Guyana cannot just really be a dollars and cents discussion, but must look at the way that people's lives are impacted and look at improving people's lives, but also look at really improving Guyana's workforce and the quality of life that people have. Now, we believe that while infrastructure is important, it is not the be-all and end-all of development. It is not a satisfactory measure to say that you've spent on infrastructure, to say that you've got development, but rather that we ultimately are looking to improve people's quality of life. We're looking to see improvements in education. I'd say I believe that education policy and our approach to a focus on education is one of the main areas where we diverge significantly from the government. And to that end, we believe that we must use thoughtful and structured direct cash transfers to help us to generate some of this development. One, because we've got a very startling poverty and inequality problem in Guyana, and poverty is still a persistent problem. But also, there are very significant inequality concerns. We want to ensure that all Guyanese are able to benefit. I'm looking at statistics here of projected growth for Guyana, and you're often seeing Guyana's growth revised upwards, 5%, 10% revisions. What we're saying is it's no point in just having swift, rapid growth when you're not seeing improvements in people's lives, and we need to have a structured approach to that. So that, I think, central vision informs a whole raft of policies that we've put forward. I can give you a sense of some of the pillar policies, but the leader's budget speech, he elaborated on quite a few of them, and we speak quite often on them, both at our press releases, and I have a weekly show where I discuss and elaborate on these policies.
Okay, Mr. Jai Prasad, you are a social critic in Parliament, and that means that we can talk about societal rates. It's climbing throughout the country. What policies the PNC has, or APNU, the coalition has, to reduce societal rates in Guyana?
Well, sir, this is something that is not new. We see that prior to 2015, Guyana was among the top 4 in the world as it relates to suicide. We have made proposal to the then government, the PPP, prior to 2015, as to how to tackle this suicide thing. Nothing was done. Minimal. Few things were done. 2015 to 2020, we saw that suicide, the amount of individuals, it was on the decline. What APNU did was to provide a more space for people to go and get some help. Health centers, hospitals, schools, police station, all these areas had a space there that someone was there to deal with situation. And we see now 2020 coming back, 2020 to now, we see that suicide is up again. I'm making this comparison to show that the PPP is not 100% positive in their doings as to reduce suicide in the communities. We do not have 5% of community centers functioning in this country. To be more specific, in Region 6, Albion Community Center Ground is the only one that we can say is in operational. We have a few small ones, Jaihin and Back Center, Skelland, and so that people can camp up and have a little time. But we observe that the PPP has been putting a lot of money in these community center rehabilitation work and all these work. And to date, many of them, most of them, are not in operation. Number two, for too long we have seen the NDC or the local authorities as a garbage collect and disposal agency. The NDC is very, very much important in any community. The local authority or the NDC or the local government body is to be set up and ensure that the community is safe. But since the 1980s to now, the NDCs have changed their narrative to garbage pickup and disposal. So every NDC, every district, every community, we are supposed to have an NDC building where people can go and have services being offered. Civic rights, societal issues, social issues, economic advice, sanitation, drainage, all these fall under the NDC. But when we fail to perform our duties in that capacity, and it is opening up worms for other areas. So, in a nutshell, if the NDC at Port Morant open up systems whereby youths can go and have an evening, someone there to discuss the topic, suicide, teenage pregnancy, HIV, school dropout. If the playground is available, that mentors, coach can go there and sit with young people, talk to them, discuss issues, because the stress level of our population is very high. Mental health issue is very, very much prevalent. And we confine ourselves and our children and everybody to school, work, and home. Take Barbies for instance. There isn't any, I must say, recreational facilities for us to be able to go out and relax and have a family time. There are clubs for adults, but they go there involved in other issues. But I'm saying that in building a community, in building a country, it must be rooted in the local government organs. If we fail to perform our duties in that capacity, then we are opening up society for decay and destruction.
This question
Suicide
is not, go ahead.
Suicide is not a political thing alone. It is an economic situation whereby most of our young people are victims. It means then that is putting a dent on our economic ability, our human resource ability to provide services to the nation. And I'm saying that the PPP, the government, is not doing enough to deal with this situation. Take, for instance, we have 129 schools in this region. And there are three.
Which region?
Region 6.
Region 6 has 51 schools.
No, 129 schools. Yes. And we have 3 established welfare officers to work with these schools. Now the ministry is employing 6 or 7 guidance and counseling officers to be attached to secondary schools. I am saying we are dealing with 15,000 plus children, young people. And if we can put systems in place to deal with them at the nursery, primary, and secondary level, as well as the tertiary, we are putting people in society who are not strong mentally to fit and function as young adults and later older adults. So it is not something that we need to say, all right, we're going to stop suicide overnight, put some stringent measures and put some counseling room. No, we have to get to the basics. We have allowed the situation of anger, of poor self-esteem and self-confidence to grow from a young age. And when it reached to a time that we cannot deal with it, we blame it on somebody else. So I am saying, if we have enough guidance and counseling officers for all the schools, like what you have in the States, or US, Canada, UK, there is a permanent member there who sits and listens to the children with their issues. If we have that here in Guyana, we can be able to remedy suicide. It will not be zero, but we can work on it.
Okay.
Our population is too small to have that number of suicide per year.
Agreed. Okay. This question is for both of you before my colleague comes back in. There are 602 electoral districts outlined for the local government elections. Mr. Jai Prasad, you as a member of parliament, has Mr. Norton discussed with you why he's only contesting about 400 of them?
We had a discussion as to why we only contesting the ones that were identified. I would say that I agree with the leader in his choice.
What's the reason provided?
We do not want the PPP to have dominance.
But if you're contesting only 400 out of 602, then the PPP will have dominance.
Well, we know that the PPP have dominance in the local government, but not in all the districts. So that is a justification, I would say.
Mr. Lowe, are you aware why the PNC or APNU, APNU, not the AFC, is contesting only 400 districts and not the 602?
What I would say is what we've observed with this most recent local government election preparations is what is, I think, shocked many Guyanese in the widespread signature fraud that we've noticed, where people are, saying that people signed on behalf of to support them, and then there's police complaints that have had to be made where people are saying they didn't sign, where people are abroad and saying they didn't sign. I think that perhaps in their haste to compete in every single possible area of Guyana, the PPP has stooped to that very basic form of electoral fraud, of getting fake signatures and so on and so forth. What we have in the PNCR said is we're going to focus on our stronghold areas. We believe very much that we have a close relationship with citizens across this country, and we're going to ensure that our stronghold areas the rights of citizens in our stronghold areas are defended. To suggest that we should compete in every single area, we don't want to say that candidates can't get support in certain areas, but it should never reach the stage where, in order to compete in an area, you're going to forge people's signatures, and people have to be complaining, and apologies have to be given to people because their dead parents' signatures are appearing in support of PPP candidates. That to me is sad that we had to see that, and represents a completely wrong-headed understanding of local democracy.
Just to set the record straight, Mr. Lowe, the PNC had already decided not to contest in those 200 plus districts long before those signatures came out. So
that argument, no, I get your argument, but I don't think that that's logically sound, right?
What's that logically sound?
Once the PUP had made a decision to compete in the various areas that they decided to compete in, they therefore had to get signatures. Now, if we had decided we're not going to compete in the areas, we don't have to get signatures, right? So therefore, it implies that they became aware that they needed to get these signatures. They couldn't get them, and they decided to forge the signatures anyway.
No, my question is that before those signatures of dead people and so on came out against the PEP, it was decided before that there will be no competition for PEP to contest in 200 districts. Charles,
yes. What I'm saying is what you are saying is supporting my argument.
No, but you're saying that because of the fraud, that's why you all decide not to contest.
No. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we have decided to compete in areas that are our strongholds to defend the rights of the people in those areas and to help to move the country forward. Okay. We do not believe as a party that if you cannot get signatures in a particular area, even if it is for a reason such as you haven't been able to go out in the field, that you should go and forge signatures. What we're saying is the fact that the PUP has so many forged signatures is because they're trying to force themselves into communities where they don't have support. We do not believe in that. Okay. I think there's 4, maybe 5 separate regions that have this problem. It's a lot.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Lowe, based on what you just said there, the Elections Commission did not rule that these signatures were forged, so that's only allegation. And what I was told also, the woman who passed away, God bless her soul, she signed the petition before she passed away. So she was alive when she passed away. Nobody forged her signature. So, I mean, those are areas, we got to be careful. We got to be careful.
I understand that an apology was already offered.
Yeah, I know, but...
Maybe the vice president was misinformed himself.
Maybe he was. But Mr. Ajay Prasad, you mentioned suicide was down during the coalition and up during the PEP. Can you give us the numbers for 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21?
No, I don't have that at hand, but I can relay that to you.
But Mr. Ajay Prasad, you can't make those allegations, you don't have the numbers.
I'm saying that the numbers are there. I can produce that.
That's not scientific. You're telling us what you think. Give us the numbers, and then
the facts remain that prior to 2015.
Mr. Ajay Prasad, that's not facts if you have the numbers. Mr. Lowe is an economist. You know numbers are important. You're a teacher. You know that too. What I'm concerned about, gentlemen, is of course, again, we come back to the contract. But the court, as you know, Justice Kissoon ruled, give the government of Guyana, a platter to help them navigate. And what struck me was what the director of the EPA, before I ask that question, what is the function of the EPA, Mr. Lowe?
Man, that's a good question because it seems like the EPA doesn't have any function right now. I mean, it is really, I think, opened a lot of Guyanese eyes and made people have some sleepless nights. We're even seeing that of the, I mean, I don't want to get into the weeds too much, but even the insurance that the EPA provided in its court application to say that the country was insured against an oil spill. The insurance, first of all,
I know. I'm just asking the question. What's the function of the EPA?
There were errors in that insurance in of itself, which leads one to believe that the EPA did not read the insurance document. Okay. Now, if the EPA is not going to be reading the insurance document that is being used as some sort that is being used to certify that the current country has coverage, then you have to ask the question: what are they even doing? When they go in there in the morning, what are they doing? That they just on
I know your valid answers, but my question to you is: what are the fundamental objective of an EPA, an Environmental Protection Agency? What are they required to their core? What is their core issue?
Well, I mean, it seems like a pretty straightforward answer. I'm not sure.
I thought so. I agree. I thought it's a very straightforward answer, Mr. Chairperson. You agree? I think that, but here, this is what the director, Mr. Parsram, in his affidavit to the appeal court says.
Yes.
He says that Guyana as a nation now earns billions of dollars annually from the petroleum activities conducted on the Liza 1 and Liza 2 fields. Both are subject to the permit suspension or cancellation, which will have a catastrophic effect on national funds for development. Is that his responsibility?
Absolutely not. He should not be really. That is.
I'm really confused, really, to know what is really the function of the EPA. They're supposed to protect our environment. Economic activity should not be part of their mandate. But it appears as though Mr. Parsham thinks that's part of his mandate. It's really ridiculous, but that's what we have in our country.
Yes, absolutely. And the judge used very strong language when he was addressing the EPA, saying essentially that they had not been doing their duty to the people of Guyana. And it's not very often that you'll see a judge use such strong language when speaking about a government agency, and then mandating that government agency go out and do its job, which is to say that they need to enforce the permits which provide for environmental coverage for Guyana.
And my recommendation would be Mr. Parsons should resign from the EPA and go work with the Ministry of Oil, energy. That's where economic resources is important, not EPA. EPA, you have to protect our environment. Economic activity is not part of your mandate. So it's really sad what our politicians are giving us.
If I may, with your permission.
Yes, Mr. Prasad.
Yes. So currently, the EPA is empowered by the Environmental Protection Act 2005 to provide protection and management of the natural environment, coordination of conservation programs, and assessment of the impacts of developmental activity on the environment. So basically, the Act of 2005 indicates to us that EPA has a right to provide protection and management of the natural environment.
That's all.
Coordination of conservation programs and assessment of the impact of developmental activity on environment. Basically, everything that happens within the jurisdiction of Guyana falls directly under the mandate of the EPA. Once it will affect the lives, citizen, economic, human resource, education, infrastructure, anything that affects basically the functioning of Guyana comes under this act of the EPA. So oil and gas falls there. It is an activity that will either make us better or take away from us.
No, but your point is taken, but the point is that the EPA should protect the environment under which we operate to ensure that future generations are not affected by
oil and gas activity is part of the environment.
But he shouldn't consider the economic life of the country. That's the government, not the EPA. The EPA is to protect the environment on which every resource operates, which include oil and gas. Anyway, recently in the newspaper, we see what Exxon is doing to Guyana, Shell did to Nigeria. They had a shell company, like we have in Guyana, Shell Company, EEGPL, or whatever the company is called. And the subsidiary, it's like Dr. Adams reported the other day. It's a child to the parent. So the subsidiary have no power unless the parent give them the authority. The subsidiary generally have no asset, right? Currently, the subsidiary have asset that is owned by the people of Guyana. Those floating vessels, they're owned by the subsidiary, but they're ours. So really, EGPL don't have no asset per se. In Nigeria, they had to go to court, and today's paper, the court in the UK ruled that Shell get off scot-free from the oil cleanup. What I'm told now is that the $2 billion parent company guarantee only covers damage to Guyana if there's an oil spill. So who will take up the damage to other Caribbean countries should they all go there knowing that most of those countries depend on tourism?
I assume the question is directed to me. That is one of the key concerns here. And if you reflect on it, you've got, I think, as many as 14 countries have been listed as at risk, reaching as far as Jamaica. But I mean, you look at South American countries, you look at Caribbean countries, there's a wide range of countries that are at risk here. What will happen in those circumstances is that Guyana will be under tremendous pressure from those countries to facilitate, to pay for cleanup. Obviously, that will have to come from our natural resources fund, and that really could end up bankrupting the country. This again is one of the reasons that the parent company guarantee is really vital. And that it is vital that we see the government enforce the existing rights, legitimate rights of Guyanese when it comes to a parent company guarantee. We don't want to create a situation where there is a significant economic crisis across the Caribbean because beaches are polluted and the tourism industry, as I think you are implying, really has collapsed. That is not acceptable. It will strain relations between Guyana and our sister states going forward, and is absolutely something that should be avoided at the very least.
Okay. Mr. Jai Prasad.
Yes, sir.
And I know Mr. Lowe is the economic advisor, but I want to ask you this question. We are told that many poor countries are on the brink of collapse from Chinese loans. The last report from the Bank of Guyana says that 39.5%, just under 40% of our external debt are held by the Chinese. If we were to have a disaster in Guyana and we cannot pay our debt, what do you see happening to the infrastructure, the airport? They're now building the Demerara Harbor Bridge with Chinese loan. And the thing about what I don't understand with Guyanese is that they see all this development around, they see all the road building, the bridge building, they think the government is doing well. But I can do the same thing too with borrowed money. You can do the same thing. Anybody can do it with borrowed money. You don't have to be a genius to do that. So what we are doing is that we are borrowing from China for the bridge. We borrow from China for the airport. We borrowed from China to do the Berbice sugar factory. We're borrowing from Saudi Arabia and from Kuwait to build the Linden Highway. We are borrowing. China has 40% of our national debt as we speak today. So what is your projection? And Mr. Lowe, this is my question to you, but let Mr. Jai Prasad answer, please. What are we seeing for the future of Guyana? Will China take over Guyana eventually?
Based on what you are saying there, sir, those are all facts, and we see it every day happening. I am on the ground, and I see the common man knows this. But because of their political indoctrination and the way they vote and the way they follow political leaders, they are not seeing it. They know that will be indebted to China. They know that if push comes to shove, China can take half of our country, which they have done in other countries already, right? So if we have the money, why not utilize our money to build our infrastructure and to do things in our country instead of taking all these loans? Well, we know what is happening. And I hope that by 2025, the people will understand what really is happening. The way forward as it relates to this 40%, from now to 2025, it will go more. You made mention about the airport and the bridge and the highway and whatever. If we are so much highly indebted to China, then we know what will happen. China will come in, take whatever they have, take control of whatever, and we will have to pay for the rest of our life. Our children and grandchildren will have to. It will not be any Guyana anymore. It will be some other annex of some other country that we owe so much. So basically, the viewers must understand that when you borrow so much of money from this country, your wealth automatically will be taken if you do not have the capacity to pay. That is as basic as we want to put it. But people are bent on their way of understanding things, and they are so much receptive to their untruths that many politicians will bring to them and sell to them that, okay, we are in good things good, we have good links with Dubai, good links with China, good links with A, B, and C, and they accept that as being the whole truth without asking a question. And if we continue to go that way, then we know that we are heading for disaster in Guyana.
Mr. Lowe, you're an economist. According to the Bank of Guyana, 82% of our debt repayment to bilateral creditors went to China Exim Bank. 82% of our foreign debt we're servicing. What is your projection as an economist? Guyana vis-a-vis China, vis-a-vis our development?
All right, well, I want to start from this perspective. We must always keep at front of mind that Guyana has more barrels of oil per person than every country except one. Given that, we should think about this problem from the perspective of a wealthy country, not from the perspective of being a country where we're concerned about our revenues and so on. Really, that means that we need to safeguard what we have. We need to ensure institutions are strong. And whatever we borrow, we need to use well, not steal, not waste, and ensure that that gives us the returns that we expect to see. One of the classic problems we have in Guyana is that as economists, you expect the road may last 20 years, but in Guyana, a road will only last you a year or two before you have to do major works on it. That's a great example of us misusing money when we have poor quality roads. Now, from that perspective, a perspective where we build our institutions, we manage our debt well, we use the money well, we can expand the national debt. We can expand the debt substantially. What I anticipate, and I think you're seeing this already, but you'll see it some more, is that as Guyana's economy expands, you're going to see other countries other than China be willing to offer financing to Guyana. You're seeing the US Exim Bank, I believe it's called, that is offering financing. I believe there was recently $150 million loan agreement MOU between the Guyana and the Middle Eastern country. And so what you're seeing is that other sources of funding are opening up. The Islamic Bank has also indicated that it is going to be a resource for funding for Guyana going forward. So you'll see diversification of our sources of funding, which I think is prudent. We must, of course, look to get low interest rates. Really, the reason that we've arrived at a state where we've accumulated debt to China is that they were, and this is across the developing world, willing to provide financing to many developing countries and to provide relatively cheap financing to those countries. Now, if that is well managed, it's not a problem. What we need to do is to ensure that it is well managed. And as I said, if we approach this from the perspective that we're going to not waste the money we borrow and build our institutions out, increasing the debt to GDP ratio. Guyana's debt to GDP ratio is still very low. Sometimes it's in the teens. It depends a bit on the growth of the economy. That is quite low. So we can accommodate a lot more debt and so on. But it is no point in borrowing if you're going to use the money for investments which have very poor returns. And a classic example is Guyana's roads.
And gentlemen, I don't want to bash both of you. You're two brilliant young men coming up in the PNC, but the PNC have an abysmal record of finance. I was when we had the former Minister of Finance, from 2015 to 2020, we had 102,000 ounces of gold at the reserve. He sold every ounce out. We collected $1.3 trillion in taxes from 2015 to 2020. What is there to show for it? The Durban Park fiasco we have there. So, you guys are brilliant, and I don't want to put you down, but the PNC have a really abysmal. I know Carl Greenwich did a great job as Minister of Finance. He brought us out from that highly indebted country that the PNC put us in. Carl Greenwich did a good job to start bringing us out of that, and then Barajagdeo as Minister of Finance continue that task. So you're saying some nice things. How do we know the PNC will go back to the old PNC?
Well, one thing that is, I think, very important for us to note, and I'll give my friend here, Dinesh, a chance to speak as well on this, is that it is important to recognize that under the previous Minister of Finance, there were some significant gains that are often not talked about. One being that we saw a substantial double-digit improvement in the mathematics pass rate, and we saw that that kind of improvement over multiple years. We have seen this government nearly double the education budget and have 10% worse pass rates. It is not just about the infrastructure that you see put down. Performance in education is a critical metric of success. Critical metric of success. And there are metrics like that we saw. We saw the infant mortality rate fall under the coalition as well. We saw that public servants were raised out of starvation wages, especially on the lower end. Those are all accomplishments which are very important accomplishments. So I think that there's this misconception that that there was financial mismanagement, which I don't think is quite fair. I think you can maybe say that people would have expected more or different policies. Maybe those types of arguments can be made. But I don't think that it is a financial mismanagement argument. In fact, I have been one of the people that has advocated for many years that we should have had more of an expansionary budget, knowing that, we would anticipate our revenues down the road to enable us to consumption smooth. As an example, I had lengthy debates with the former Minister of Finance over making the University of Guyana free. And, I'm a staunch advocate in that area. But the point, therefore, being that there are many successes in terms of the way the coalition spent those finances. And it is not to say that the coalition accumulated some sort of ridiculous level of debt. In fact, you'll note that many years the coalition had the highest growth rate in the entire Caribbean. And this is before we started to produce a drop of oil.
Dr. Rose?
Before Dr. Rose go,
what was the highest growth rate in the Caribbean the coalition had? What was the number?
The coalition had, I believe, 2 years where you had 4 to 5% growth. And where at that point in time, it was the highest in the Caribbean. Yes, I believe there should be 2 years. I mean, it's a few years ago, but those should be the growth rates.
Was it higher than Barbados?
Yes, that's the year that we were higher than Barbados.
I think you should go back and check that. Let me just say this. And you're a bright guy, and I don't want to correct you. But you said that during the coalition time, math increased, and under the PP within the last 2 years, it dropped off by 10%. Where you get those stats from, can I ask?
Those stats are the pass rates at CSEC. The reason that I follow this issue so closely is that the nonprofit I said that I had started at the beginning of the show was geared towards helping students with their algebra and their grammar so that they'd have a good foundation for CSEC. That, what we saw for many years pre-2015 is around a 30-something% pass rate at math. You'll observe that you're going to see some 40-some% pass rates. I think 43% was the highest under the coalition. You'll observe that last year, the pass rate in mathematics for Guyana was 34%, and the year before was 32%. It is something that obviously I'm very passionate about and which I'm quite annoyed by, because the budget is, as I said, is nearly double for education from the time that we had that 43% pass rate. Okay,
but I will just say this. During the latter years of the coalition, 2018 going to 2019, it started to decline again. And the PP is just assembling at the PP right now. But I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to argue that, because we got different figures, and I monitor it very, very strongly too. Now, the economy right now is hovering at about 43% GDP growth rate. But the bulk of it is based on the oil industry, Mr. Lowe. So if you remove the oil industry from the GDP, it's between 6.5% to 7%, which APNOS criticized. But it is still the highest in the Caribbean. What have you to say?
Yes, well, I think in any country that has an expanding oil sector and where the government is spending 40% more than in the previous year, you're going to see an increase in the growth of the economy, if only to satisfy the increase in demand due to the increase in government spending. But that depends on whether we see that spending as yielding the type of returns that it should yield. As I remarked previously, we could spend a tremendous amount on infrastructure and grow the economy by stimulating demand. However, if that infrastructure does not meet simple economic models like lasting for a reasonable number of years, as I had mentioned, the 20-year number, but there are models which say that it could last 15 years, some say 30 years. Then what happens is, while you're spending a lot of money and you're seeing an increase in the growth of the non-oil sector now, over the long run, what you're doing is you're not getting appropriate levels of value for money. And so you're underperforming what you should have been, the targets that you should have been reaching. We should also note, one of the important things to note even is that last year, in several key sectors, agricultural sectors, we saw very significant declines. Sugar was abysmal, rice was problematic as well. Gold managed somehow to shrink, even though the gold price was very high. We have to bear some of these things in mind when we talk about these growth rates and to ask ourselves whether this growth is sustainable, whether this is the growth in the areas that we would have maybe been looking for improvement. Anybody can, as your colleague rightly said, anybody can spend money, anybody can stimulate demand, but if you're spending the money well is the real question.
Where sugar stands today, do you know?
Well, I know that the last the last that came out of the Bank of Guyana was that sugar had recovered somewhat. This is going into the end of last year. Sugar had recovered somewhat, but it was still not. It still had not met its annual target. The exact figure escapes me. I believe it's 20% it had underperformed, but it could be more than that.
Mr. Lowe, for the past X amount of years, the first quarter it was 13,000 tons being produced. This year is 16,000 tons.
Well, that's good that the first quarter's gone well. What I'm saying is that last year was abysmal. And last year was abysmal even though the target had been cut by some 33%. Right. So even the lower target, they undershot massively.
I'm not defending the sugar industry.
Okay.
But you know why the last year it was abysmal. Because the IFLOC plant was down for almost 6 months.
Yeah.
We've got to take these things into consideration because they had a gearbox there that was built since 1919 and they had no spare parts for it, so they had to manufacture a brand new gearbox, which took them 6 months to produce. So we just can't use old scale statements to say, oh, sugar's been done without looking at what was happening.
As far as I understand it, you had a massive national budget last year. The PUP has been in office for 25 of the last 30 years. I mean, if we're in a situation where we still are using a gearbox from 1919, as you're saying, and the government is pumping out budgets 40% larger year over year, and the government is putting billions toward Gaisuko, mind you, I have to ask myself, what is the purpose of all the spending? And I'll say it again. There's a difference between spending more and getting some value out of your money. There is no point in putting money to Gaisuko and have a gearbox that breaks down.
So you're blaming the PP for the old gearbox. So what
I'm saying is, what's the point?
It was built in 1919. What time after came to power?
What I'm saying is the money has to be used properly. And I think that's a pretty reasonable thing to say.
Well, I don't think we can blame it on the gearbox because the argument can go, the PNC was there for 28 years too. Why didn't it change it? It was built in 1919.
The budget last year,
I am not here to condemn
$100 billion. The budget last year was 500. The budget has tripled from 2018 to now. Money is being spent. It's not that there's some dearth of resources. Is the money being spent well?
Okay. As the economic advisor, did you advise Mr. Norton, and if not you, who you think did, to say that he will bring out his oil plan, his oil policy just before the election in 2025? Did you advise him to do that, or someone else did, or he did it on his own?
I would say this. The leader has, not for the first time, this is not the first time the leader has expressed that he will make clear different elements of his policies when he sees that it is the appropriate time to make clear those elements of his policies. This is something that he said at many press conferences. And so I just see this as an extension of an existing policy. There are times when I will say to him that I think this is a good time for us to talk about a particular policy, and he'll take that under advisement. To that end, I don't see this as a new statement. I just see it as people being aware that this is his approach now.
Mr. Jai Prasad, with all that is happening now in the oil industry, do you think it's right for your leader to say, I will not talk about the oil industry now until 2025?
Well, I would say there is a time for everything, and we do not want to spill the beans now. I think it is a good move that he reserves some of his ideas so that it can be used to.
So if you speak about it now, what beans is he spilling?
Our plans, basically the PNC, AP, and UAFC plans, must come out at the right time. If it is our plan, then we will know how to table it so that the people will be able to understand that we will have some amendment changes and so forth, so that we can be able to
wait until the Exxon do what it has to do all these years, the rest of this year, the rest of next year, 2025 election coming until maybe December. He will wait and let ExxonMobil continue to exploit the people without making a statement or come up with this policy. That's what you're telling the nation?
Can the impact from the opposition leader change Exxon?
No, that's not my question, though.
That's exactly what I thought that Dinesh would say.
Why don't he comes out with a policy? The PEP, whatever the PEP is doing, they're doing. Why do he come with a point that the nation see that he's taking leadership to say, well, look, this is what I'm going to do, X, Y, and Z. You have to show leadership. And if you're saying that you're not going to do it.
I would agree with you. I would agree with you 100%. But shouldn't the Guyanese population hold the PPP for telling them that we will change the oil contract and the oil deals, and now they are 3 years now, and what is happening to it?
I agree that they should hold the PPP accountable. But how can you be telling me or telling the nation that the people should hold the PPP accountable? The PPP said they're going to change it during the election. They have not done so. Hold them accountable. But the PNC or your leader is saying he will not talk about an oil policy now until 2025. Don't you think he should be held accountable the same way?
I am saying that at the right time, our plan, the leaders' plan, the PNC, APNU, AFC plan, will come forward so that we can be able to not be in the same category like the PPP, fool the people again.
Okay.
So we do not want to.
Okay.
You know.
Now let me turn to another question.
Before you go, may I comment on something that Mr. Sugrimid mentioned earlier?
Yeah,
in terms of the PNC.
Make it short because time is running out. Make it short.
Yes. I want to say from 2015 to 2020, we have had a significant improvement in the lives of people in Region 6. Infrastructure, health, education, public service, service to the residents in Berbice improved significantly in Region 6. Yes, we had the situation with the Gaisuku, whereby two sugar factories estate were closed. That was an impact negatively on the lives on the people. But in terms of education, health, reduction of the Berbice Bridge, and most importantly, what we bypass, significant increase to the public servants. 23 years. What the APNU AFC government did in that 3 years is far more than what the PPP did for 23 years. We must take our blows when we, have to, but we must give credit as well. I am saying that.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Cost of living. What is your government, your party's policy on cost of living?
And guys, we got 1 minute left in our program.
Yeah.
We have proposed on every platform the plan for cost of living. Comrades, the people are not enjoying the 40% and the 5% and the 20% growth that we see on paper. Things really tight in the country. You see people working day to day. Jobs are not available. A lot of people going to the government part-time jobs. But
okay, we'll have to get you back, Mr. Jaiprasad. Sorry to cut you off. We'll have to get you back to talk about some of the plans that the PNC has in mind. And Mr. Lowe, the same with you as well. Just before we close, Mr. Colin Haynes sent me a note here. He says, according to the World Bank, in 2019, Guyana growth rate was 5.4%, Barbados had a negative 1%.
Thank you.
And in 2020, the coalition, when the coalition left office, the growth rate was 43.5%. Barbados had a negative 13.3% because of the pandemic. So that is what the World Bank is saying, according to Mr. Colin Haynes.
Growth rate, but growth rate is not GDP.
Yeah, that's correct.
That's not what we said.
So we're talking two different things there. Anyway, go ahead.
That is correct. Anyway, gentlemen, we want to thank you for being with the program tonight. In closing, Mr. Lowe, anything in closing, any statement?
Absolutely. One thing I just wanted to address, you mentioned earlier that a woman had indicated that her mother had signed before she passed away. I don't want to be insensitive if that is the case with the woman. I want to respect her wishes and her mother's wishes. I hope that, because I wasn't aware that that's the case. I just wanted to clarify that. The second thing that I would say is that I really do hope that we'll get a chance to talk a lot more about the cost of living issue. I think there's a lot more to talk about there, because while of course we're in the throes of serious conflicts in the governance of Guyana's oil industry, we must not neglect the pain that is suffered by the average Guyanese in this difficult circumstance, in which we've seen assets like the stock market go up as much as 400% in only a few years, and housing prices go up, especially in Georgetown. Whereas the average man, the minimum wage is only increased by 38% within the same time period. So we want to recognize that there are people out there who are struggling to keep up. We want to ensure that their concerns are dealt with, and we want to help them to understand, one, what the government is doing, but two, of course, we from the opposition perspective believe that there are several things that should be done. And so that, I think, is a way to bookend the discussion, in that as much as we're talking about stellar growth, we must also talk about the real impact on the lives of human beings. And we in the opposition talk about these issues at length because our people-centered vision sees real improvements in the lives of average Guyanese as ultimately the goal here.
We want to assure you that sometime later in the year, next year, we'll have you back once you can discuss with us your economic plan. Without that, we'll be talking around circles. Mr. Jaiprasad, any closing remark?
Yes, sir. I want to call upon the government to ensure that, one, we have free education from nursery to university, which we had in the past under the PNC time. 2, Barbados Bridge toll should be reduced. 3, reduction of VAT as promised by the BBB. 4, house lot to Guyanese people free. We know under Cherry Dragon time, a house lot was for $1. Now we have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars. Oil-rich Guyana, 40% growth. One of the fastest growing economy in the world. But still we're living in poverty. Subsidize poor people. I have on numerous occasions called on the government to offer subsidies to our Guyanese population. We have too much money in this country and it is not filtering down to the poor man. And finally, salaries for public servant. We see what happened in 23 years. We observe what happened under AP and UAFC, and we are getting back there under the PPP. We need to pay our people. In closing, I want to say that we need to be very careful. Our nurses, our people in the medical field are leaving every single day. Yet, we are not ensuring that we put systems in place to remedy this. I want to say that, brothers and sisters, viewers, wherever you are, it is time for you to start ask questions. When the politicians come in the area, ask them questions. You are paying to the treasury so much in taxes, you need to hold them accountable. Comrades, thank you very much for having me on Globespan, and I do hope that we can share our economic plan and the way forward not long from now. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Rose, anything in closing?
Yes, Mr. Daneshwar Jai Prasad, what you just said are brilliant talking points for this local government elections, and they can be carried over to 2025 as well, national elections. So you have some good ideas there, brilliant talking points. Now, at this juncture, I want to ask all Guyanese to keep in their thoughts and prayers the lives lost of those 19 children, their parents, their relatives, and loved ones. Please keep them in your thoughts and prayers for the next few days as much as possible until we get over this whole type of healing and grieving. Thank you.
Yeah, again, thank you so much, audience, for watching the program tonight. And thank you, Devin and Ryan, and to Nohar Singh. Until the next time, God bless our great country of Ghana, and may the souls of those young people rest in eternal peace.
Thank you.